Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Look, I don't really need to paint a picture for you today because if you're listening to this, you've probably lived it. You know that specific kind of exhaustion, the one that hits around 11 p.m. when you are staring at like row 4,000 of a spreadsheet, your eyes are crossed, the coffee stopped working 3 hours ago, and you are essentially functioning as a very expensive, very tired human calculator.
Ah, the dreaded spreadsheet zombie mode. It is a rite of passage, for sure, but it's also where, good strategy just goes to die.
Right. And usually when we talk about escaping that grind, people start talking about work-life balance or, I don't know, hiring more juniors. But today, we're looking at a stack of sources that suggests a completely different escape hatch. We're talking about the Consultant 2.0. The source material we're diving into is a broadcast called Revolución a la Consultoría from OscarAI. And the promise here is, well, it's bold. It's about moving from that zombie state to being a strategic hero.
And just to ground us before we get too lofty, this isn't some futurist prediction for, 2035. The argument OscarAI is making is that this transition is available right now. It's about letting the technology do the heavy lifting so you can actually focus on the part of the job you probably signed up for in the first place.
Which is solving the actual problem.
Exactly.
That's our mission today. We're going to unpack how AI is shaking up the consulting world. And I want to be clear, we aren't just talking about efficiency. Everyone knows computers are fast. We're talking about how this shifts the actual business model, the day-to-day experience, and frankly, whether this makes the job fun again. Because let's be honest, cleaning data is not fun.
It is definitely not why people get into this industry, no.
So let's start with the landscape. I feel like we've been hearing about data-driven consulting for, 20 years? Every firm claims they are. What makes this specific moment, according to our sources, any different from the big data hype we heard back in, say, 2015?
That's a fair skepticism. I think the difference lies in the shift from intuition-based to evidence-based, but at a scale that was just impossible before. In the past, data-driven meant you had a hunch, and then you went to find data to back it up. Or, you analyzed a sample size a human could reasonably manage.
Right. You looked at the last 3/4 of sales and said, I think it's the marketing spend.
Exactly. But the shift OscarAI highlights is that AI doesn't just look at sales figures. It can process terabytes of information in seconds.
Yeah.
It's acting like a modern oracle. It's finding correlations that a human brain literally could not see because we just can't hold that many variables in our heads at once.
So it's the difference between, I think sales are down because of the season, and the AI telling you sales are down because of a correlation between local humidity levels, 3 specific competitor ads on TikTok, and a pricing model change you made 6 months ago.
That is the leap.
Yeah.
It lets you walk into a client meeting not with a hypothesis, but with a mathematical certainty derived from data sets that would take a human a lifetime to read.
But here's where I get stuck, on the business side of things. The traditional consulting model is built on the billable hour. It incentivizes manual labor. If I can do 10 hours of work in 10 seconds using AI, haven't I just destroyed my own revenue model?
That is the terror and the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
The Consultant 2.0 model, it has to break the billable hour. You stop getting paid for the 10 hours of number crunching. You get paid for the strategic value of the insight. And the source argues that this actually lets the little guy win.
The little guy advantage. This was one of the most interesting parts of the reading for me. Usually this kind of tech favors the giants, the McKinseys, the Deloittes, because they're the ones with the budget for the supercomputers.
Historically, yes, you're totally right. 5 years ago, if you wanted to run this kind of predictive modeling, you needed a server farm and a team of data scientists in the basement. But now, the compute power is accessible via an API for what, $20 a month? This just flattens the hierarchy. An independent consultant or a small boutique firm can now compete with the giants on the quality of their data analysis.
So you don't need the army of junior analysts anymore. You just need the right software stack.
Precisely. The barrier to entry for high-end strategy has just collapsed. The goal, as it's stated in Revolución a la Consultoría, is to move away from endless meetings and manual grunt work. If you aren't spending 40 hours cleaning data, you can spend those 40 hours actually talking to your client, understanding their culture, and implementing the solution.
Which is the strategic hero part. You aren't the person bringing the spreadsheet. You're the person bringing the wisdom.
And the relationships. You can't automate a handshake or building trust.
Okay, so that's the why. I want to get into the how, because I think a lot of listeners get paralyzed here. They see the potential, but they have no idea where to start. The source material lays out a roadmap. And step 1 is defining your niche.
And they offer a very, very specific warning here. Do not try to be a generalist.
That makes so much sense. I see so many LinkedIn profiles now that just say AI consultant. It feels like saying I'm a computer consultant in 1995. It means nothing.
The source uses a great analogy. It says trying to be an AI generalist is like trying to cook every single dish on a menu.
Yeah.
You end up with a messy kitchen and a lot of mediocre food. You can't be the AI guy for everyone. You have to focus on areas where AI inherently shines.
Like supply chain optimization or predictive finance?
Right. Fields that are heavy on structured data.
Mm.
If you go in saying, I use AI to fix your business, nobody listens. But if you say, I use predictive analysis to spot supply chain bottlenecks in Singapore 2 weeks before they happen, well, that's a value proposition.
So you wrap the AI around a specific business problem. Now, the source also talks about the tools themselves, and this is where people get nervous. They mentioned Python. I feel like as soon as you say Python, half the consultants listening just broke out in a cold sweat. They're thinking, I went to business school, so I didn't have to code.
I get that fear, I do. But the source makes a crucial distinction. You don't need to be a software engineer building apps from scratch, but you do need to understand the limitations of your current tools. Think about Excel. We all know that moment when the spreadsheet freezes because you added one too many pivot tables.
The spinning wheel of death.
That is the spreadsheet zombie habitat. Python is what kills the zombie. It just eats that data for breakfast. The suggestion isn't that you need to become a master coder, but you need to be code literate. You need to know enough to use a tool like ChatGPT to write the Python script for you.
Ah, that's a key unlocking move. You aren't writing the code, you're the architect telling the AI, write me a script that analyzes this data set.
Exactly. Or using no-code platforms like Zapier to connect your apps. It's about building a pipeline. The source references a program from Harvard, the AI Strategy for Business Leaders, which suggests this is becoming the new baseline literacy. It's like knowing how to read a balance sheet. You just have to know it.
They use an analogy for this mindset shift that I absolutely loved, the Tony Stark analogy.
It's perfect, isn't it? Think about Tony Stark in his lab. He isn't manually welding every screw. He's talking to Jarvis. He's saying, run a simulation on this alloy, or test this flight configuration. He's tinkering. He's playing with the tech to solve a problem.
And that's a very different energy than being a suit. You're not just managing, you're creating.
It transforms the work from passive administration to active creation.
This leads us right to step 2 in the roadmap, integration and automation. And here the analogy shifts from Tony Stark to the sidekick.
Right. If you're the hero, AI is your sidekick. You give the orders, you set the strategy, and the sidekick does the dirty work.
And let's get specific on dirty work, because we're not just talking about taking out the trash. We're talking about cognitive drudgery.
Take meetings. How much of a consultant's life is spent frantically typing notes, just terrified they missed a key quote from the client? The source points to tools like Otter.ai. It doesn't just record, it transcribes and extracts insights.
Which changes the entire dynamic of the meeting. If I know the AI is catching every word, I can actually make eye contact. I can watch your body language. I can actually listen to you instead of acting like a court stenographer.
That is a massive upgrade in client service. But there's a more complex example from the source that I found really compelling, the HR consulting use case.
Oh, the resume analysis. This one blew my mind. Walk us through how this works, because it's not just keyword matching, is it?
No. Keyword matching is 2010. This is predictive. Imagine you're hiring for a high turnover role. You have 5,000 resumes. A human team might spend weeks scanning those. The Consultant 2.0 feeds that data into an AI model that's been trained on the company's historical data, who stayed, who quit, who got promoted.
So the AI isn't just looking for went to Harvard, it's looking for subtle patterns. Maybe it notices that people who have a gap year in their history tend to stay longer at this specific company because they're more settled.
Exactly. Patterns a human would never consciously spot. The claim in the source is that this cuts screening time by 50%. But more importantly, it potentially increases the quality of the hire. You're presenting the client with a shortlist that is scientifically vetted, not just, I liked his vibe.
And I have to play devil's advocate here. There's a catch. There's always a catch. You can't just let the sidekick run the show.
No, and the source is very, very clear on this. They cite an MIT study on ChatGPT and consulting. The finding was nuanced. Yes, productivity skyrocketed, but it requires extreme vigilance regarding accuracy and bias. The sidekick is smart, but it can also, it can hallucinate or be incredibly biased.
We are going to do a deep dive into that bias issue in a minute because it is the biggest watch out. But before we get to the risks, I want to finish the strategy. The source material provided a framework for adoption. SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
Which is great because use AI is not a goal, it's a wish.
Right. So let's look at the short term. They suggest a 3-month timeline where you automate 20% of your administrative tasks. Now, I have to push back a bit. Is that actually realistic? We've all tried to use AI to write an email, and you spend 20 minutes trying to make it not sound like a robot. Sometimes it feels faster to just write the thing yourself.
That friction is real, especially in the first month. That's the learning curve. But think about the repetitive stuff. Drafting meeting agendas, summarizing long email chains, initial research for a proposal. The source argues that once you have your prompts dialed in, your Tony Stark commands, you really do get that 10% back. It's about building the habit of asking the AI first.
So the investment is in the prompt engineering upfront.
Yes. Then you move to the medium term 6 to 12 months. This is where you move from admin to actual consulting work. You use AI to analyze client data to increase recommendation precision. They suggest aiming for a 30% increase in precision measured by client retention.
Precision is a great word there. It's not just more ideas, it's better ideas.
Ideas that don't fail. And finally, the long term, we're talking 2 years out. This is pure positioning. You want to market your consultancy as an expert in AI-driven transformation. This is how you get the high-value contracts. You stop competing on price and start competing on capability.
You go from, I use AI to save time, to, I am an expert in how AI changes business. That's a powerful pivot.
And the firms doing this now are seeing the revenue jumps. It's the classic early adopter advantage.
Okay, we've painted a pretty rosy picture. We're Tony Stark, we're saving time, we're making money. But we need to look at the dark clouds, the watchouts. Because if you do this wrong, you don't just lose time, you could get sued.
Or worse, you could destroy a company's culture. The biggest risk they discuss is algorithmic bias. And the source used a humorous but honestly terrifying hypothetical to illustrate this, the left-handed example.
I laughed at this and then I stopped laughing.
All right, so picture the boardroom. You're the consultant. You've fed 10 years of company efficiency data into your black box model. You present the findings to the CEO. You say, we have found the root cause of your inefficiency. You need to fire everyone who is left-handed.
And the CEO looks at you like you've lost your mind. Why are we firing Steve? Steve is great.
But the data says Steve is 3% slower. Why? Maybe the office only buys right-handed scissors. Maybe the desks are configured in a way that bumps his elbow. The AI sees the correlation lefties are slower, but it doesn't understand the context. It doesn't understand scissors.
That is such a perfect example of correlation without causation. The AI isn't smart in a human sense. It's just a pattern matcher.
And if you apply that to gender or race or age, it stops being funny immediately.
It becomes a lawsuit.
Exactly. So the consultant 2.0 cannot just hand over the report. You have to be the ethical buffer. The source calls for ethical frameworks and regular audits. You have to ask, does this recommendation make sense in the real world? You have to defend the humans against the math sometimes.
This brings up the client side of things. If I'm a client and you tell me you're using AI, my first thought might be privacy. If you put my proprietary sales data into a public model like ChatGPT, who owns that data?
That is the elephant in the room. And consultants have to be the guardians here. You cannot be pasting sensitive IP into a free public web interface. This is where that technical literacy comes back in. You need to know which tools are enterprise grade, which ones keep data private, and you need to be able to explain that to a nervous client.
And beyond privacy, there's just general fear, client resistances. If the robot is doing the work, why am I paying you?
That's the objection you have to prep for. And the answer is, you aren't paying me for the math. You're paying me to know which math to do and what to do with the answer. You have to educate them that AI reduces the cost of the process, which allows you to focus on the outcome.
It seems like a lot to learn. And the source mentioned a talent gap. It's hard to hire people who know how to do this because the tech changes every week.
Stanford released some data on this. The talent pool is shallow. So for listeners running a firm, or even just for themselves, the advice is, don't try to hire the perfect AI consultant. Build one. You have to invest in training. You have to cultivate this skill set internally.
And for the independent consultant listening who is worried about the price tag, I can't afford enterprise software.
Start small. The little guy advantage works because so many tools have free tiers or low costs. Prove the ROI, the return on investment on the cheap stuff first. Don't buy the Ferrari until you know how to drive the Honda.
I like that. So let's try to synthesize this. We've covered the shift from intuition to evidence, the roadmap to get there, and the ethical minefields you have to dodge. When you pull back, what's the core message of this deep dive?
I think the core message is that AI is not a threat to the consultant. It is a superpower multiplier. It offers speed, precision, and personalization that simply wasn't possible before. It allows you to do the job you actually want to do.
It's the difference between digging a ditch with a spoon and digging it with an excavator.
And remember, the cycle the source describes. Learn, implement, iterate. You won't get it perfect on day one. It's a constant process of tweaking your tools and your approach.
The source material ended with that visual of navigating the future at warp speed. It really does feel like if you're standing still, you are actually moving backward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The standard for what constitutes good advice is just rising. If you're still relying only on your gut, you are going to get beaten by someone who has the data.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with a thought that's been nagging at me while we reviewed all this. We talked about AI taking over the data processing, the logic, the predictions. It's doing all the smart work.
It is winning on IQ, yeah.
Right. So if the AI is the smartest guy in the room, what's left for the human? This raises a really provocative question. In a world where AI does all the heavy lifting, does human creativity, the ability to tell a story, to empathize, to understand why the left-handed scissors matter, does that become the most expensive luxury item on the consulting menu?
That is the question to ponder. Maybe the soft skills are about to become the hardest currency we have.
Something to think about while you close those spreadsheets tonight. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.